Thanks for your patience, everybody. I think we'll get started now. So I'll just start off with a quick introduction. So today we're going to just give you a quick overview of what we do. And so my name is Ian Nicholson, Sales Marketing Director at Data Transformed. My colleague Dan Cox, our CTO, will be giving the actual technical demonstration. So I'll just kick off with just a few short slides, and then Dan will get stuck in with the product. So once again, if you have any questions, please just use the little speech bubble at the top of the Join Me toolbar there. So let's kick off. So again, thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm going to kick off with some background on ETL processes. Some of you may or may not be familiar. So I'm going to talk first about current business intelligence and data warehouse approaches and why they don't work. And then, of course, we're going to see how BIReady basically is going to change all of that with a demonstration. At the end, we can have some further questions, and then we'll wrap up. So I just put this little story together. A day in the life of an ETL developer. Ironically, if you read through this, every aspect of this guy's life is pretty much automated except for what he does. His alarm clock, hot water, his alarm, laundry, his toaster, everything's automated, and yet he's still writing ETL code. Okay, it's the 21st century, so what's that about? Well, I found this nice, definition of automation. But the point is, guys, that the design and building of information systems for BI, it's not a black art or mystery. It's a very well-defined set of processes that can be automated. Bill Inman, who's the father of data warehousing, describes the process very well in his books, as does Dan Lindstedt for his Data Vault, and Ralph Kimball for Star Schema Data Marts. Now, Bill Inman has publicly stated that ETL has not seen radical change like automation because the major ETL vendors are, in his word, complacent and do not want to lose market share. So logically, they maintain the status quo to keep selling their products and upgrades. I just want to drive one point home, very clear, right? Let's be very clear on this. ETL tools are complex to use and require specialist skills, not just to drive them, but to manage everything else around them. ETL tools do not build data warehouses. Okay, let's be clear on that. People build data warehouses using them. You need a data modeler, you need a database administrator, a team of people to gather requirements, people to manage the project, people to document the processes, and then to test the end result. So it becomes a very costly and time-consuming process, which is why data warehousing projects have traditionally remained in the domain of only the very biggest companies. They're notoriously risky. If you ask any IT manager, hey, let's start on a data warehousing project, he'll know he's up for a big, expensive failure. According to Gartner, 80% of data warehouse and BI projects fail or run over time and budget. More than half actually fail, right? So this is a Gartner stat. And in our experience, users don't know what they don't know. So we're saying it's kind of pointless doing a big kind of upfront user requirements gathering stage with data warehousing because most people cannot articulate what they need from a data warehouse. They know what they might to translate into a specification for a data warehouse. So there's another large area for failure to occur. And then, of course, finally, you have change. The world is constantly changing, requirements are constantly changing, and these are things that need to be managed. And BI projects are not a destination, but a journey, and change is inevitable. So, a couple of stats. So Gartner, this is one published this year, 76% of the budget of a BI solution is sunk in the traditional data warehousing phase, which is massive. And that ties nicely with my own research I did on LinkedIn about a year or so ago, where I asked BI experts, how much of the time of your project are you spending just shaping the data? And the answer came back 75% or more. So this is a huge chunk of time and effort, which then if you consider the 8% failure rate, tells you that this is the biggest area of risk for your BI. So right in the deal, but getting the data ready for it is. Quick question. So why do we need data warehouses at all? So all you guys are here to understand what we're about, and so presumably you have some sort of need or requirement in that area. So I'm guessing that one of the items on that list there is applicable to you. So why is it all going wrong? What is the process that is causing all this failure and heartache. So, of course, the object of your BI project is to turn raw data from your sources into some kind of report. And we will understand that there's usually a couple of data marts involved that will provide the data in a ready state for those reports. A business analyst will maybe start by going asking the users what they need to see, and so they'll write a business requirements and functional spec, and that might get given to a project manager who will get somebody to analyze the data and understand what can be done. And then the result of that is given to a data modeler who will have to actually design the data warehouse. And generally what they do to save time and money, as a lot of people do these days, is that they'll design a star schema. And so they'll give that star schema to the DBA to put that into as a ready table set ready to go in the target database. And then, of course, he'll give some instructions to the ETL guy who then has to develop the code. So what happens next? So this ETL guy will write all this code to bring across to that data mart. Once he's done all of that work and the user gets a report, which could be months have gone by, we find that things need to be changed, and I can guarantee you they will need to be changed. So you've got to go back through this process again, basically get some more specs, rejig the model, update the star schema, give it back to the ETL guy. But now, because this was done in a kind of a quick way, what he's actually got is a nice big plate of spaghetti code that he has to unravel to figure out where he's got to make the changes. And this is why, traditional data warehouse techniques using ETL tools, ladies and gentlemen, does not work. Now, even if you tried to do it the proper way, so if you've gone and read one of Bill Inman's books, or maybe you've been to a course on Data Vault and you understand that something has to happen in the middle to the data. Now, in the previous example, the point being is that a lot of developers don't know how to create a third normal form enterprise data warehouse, and they don't know how to design or build a data vault, right? Because they're complicated and very complex solutions. So in this scenario, so we've got the same sort of idea. We decide we're going to do the job properly. The same sequence applies, but now there's a bit more budget and time given to it in the order of months. But again, the user's going to say, we need some changes, and because you've got a bigger, more complex solution, you're going to need more time and money to make those changes. So I hope you can see you've got a very disjointed, very, lots of different skill sets, lots of different tools required to deliver that particular solution. And as a result, it's very risky. So you've got that 80% chance of failure. The bottom line here, guys, you can't be agile with ETL tools. Agile development is a very popular methodology these days, and it just cannot be done with regular ETL tools. What's the answer? Well, we're not saying we've got the magic bullet, but we've got something that is certainly a whole lot better and makes a lot more sense, and it's called BIReady, and it's a company in the Netherlands, and it's what we call the first true data warehouse automation tool, because it actually designs and builds those third normal form and data vault structures automatically for you, and you'll see that in the demo. Now, BIReady's partnered with all these companies down here, so Computer Associates have actually built a link to BIReady, so any of you out there, data modelers that use Irwin, you can use Irwin to model your data sources, and there's now a BIReady button in Irwin that will then take your model and convert that into a third normal form and data vault architecture for building an enterprise data warehouse. And then we've got, of course, the IBM and Oracle, so BIReady can generate code for SQL Server, for Oracle, for DB2, for Netezza, Teradata, Action, and we've got this QFire here, which is a quality firewall. Now, I think Dan's going to show us a quick bit of that in his demonstration. So as we've already seen, waterfall doesn't work. It creates a lot of problems, but you still have this problem where you've got to get data from here to your reports and dashboards, okay? And the traditional ways, you stage your data, build your enterprise data warehouse, certain normal form of data vault to build your data marts, so then build your reports. So what does BIReady do? Well, quite literally, it does all of that. And that might sound quite amazing. You're thinking, Ian, that sounds like magic or, a bit of a con, but the way that it does it is very clever. What BIReady actually does is that it looks at your data source and it derives the model that would be required to put that into third normal form or data vault. So going back to what I was saying about, these things can be automated. A modeler, data modeler, human data modeler would apply the same rules, and BIReady is doing this for you automatically, and it does it in seconds. So whereas a data modeler might sit down and spend a few weeks or even a month looking at a source data model to work out how that should look in third normal form or data vault, BIReady is doing that in seconds. So once we have a model, a source data model, and we have the third normal form, then BIReady will generate all the code to build and populate that model in your warehouse. There's no ETL process or no ETL development anymore. There's no creating of the schema and the target anymore. BIReady is managing all of that for you. And if you don't have a model for your data source, BIReady can even reverse engineer one for you. And it even has a built-in rudimentary data modeler that you can actually, if you have data from a flat file source or something where there's no referential integrity, BIReady can allow you to model that in the products as well. So if you want to change your warehouse, all you need to do is change the model, and BIReady will change it automatically. It really is quite an amazing achievement. And BIReady does everything that a developer would have to do. So all these things like managing all the surrogate keys and zero records and slowly change dimensions, all those things. It does it all. All those things are defined. All those things can be automated, and they are in BIReady. And even takes the same steps that a human would take to do it. So it'll bring the data in from the source and stage it first. It'll auto design the data warehouse and build and populate it. And it'll also build, actually from a wizard. There's a wizard then that you just pick the things you want for your facts and dimensions in your star schema data marts, and BIReady will generate the code for those as well. Now there's even a thing that is called data shop in BIReady. So once you have a star schema, BIReady can expose that as a pivot table in Excel. So without any BI tools, or before you commit to any BI development, you can prove the model and prove the data in the data mart to the business in a few seconds in Excel. And Dan will show us a bit of that as well. So now going back to that sort of same model with BIReady. So what's happening? So now we've got our data sources. So BIReady is reverse engineering that model. It's then auto generating the code, auto generating the model and the code to build and populate it, and does the same for the data marts. And of course, if there's something wrong, then you're talking about very fast iterative changes to fix matters. Now we've got when we were doing our due diligence for this product, we spoke to a company in the States, and they told us if they get a request for a new report that requires a data mart in the morning, they can generally deliver it by the afternoon, the data mart, all right, which is pretty incredible. So the benefits, okay, so it's obviously a lot faster by a factor we estimate of about 50 times or more, okay. So now your risk project failure is vastly reduced, and of course so are your development costs, okay. And then you've got all the other benefits there as well. Another one, of course, you're getting what you need sooner. You're not waiting 3 months for a report. You're not waiting 6 months for a report. You can have that report, in a few days. So the big difference, guys, is that unlike with ETL, you're not investing in the code anymore. I mean, there's nothing more painful when you've done 6 months of work and it's all got to be changed. And the first thought, the IT manager has is, oh my God, we've spent all that money having that code developed. Well, that's no longer the case. So you're investing in your design, and that design will hardly ever change because it's all based upon how your source systems look. So all that pain is gone. So you've got faster design, faster coding, faster delivery, and no more investment in code. See a question there, is the code generated in SQL? Yes, it is. Does that mean it can integrate one source? No, you can integrate from multiple sources, and we'll show that in the demo. So now instead of that 75% of the time or more, we can reduce that to half or less. You can arrive at your nirvana of self-serve reporting. Now, just before we start the demo, I've got a few slides here. So we're going to be showing you the output result in Yellowfin, which is an amazing Australian success story. I've never seen it before. You're going to see it right now because it's a result. So I'm just going to quickly whiz through these slides. hopefully your screen will refresh quick. I do want to crack on. So lots of data visualizations, proactive alerts, GIS mapping capability. There's a nice dashboard example from Yellowfin. With Yellowfin, you can there's a beautiful social interface, so you can actually share reports with other users, and you can annotate them with various things which have nothing to do with the data in the data warehouse. So here, for example, turning Google Ads off and seeing the effect on sales. Very handy, very collaborative. And of course, GIS data mapping and mobile report delivery to audiences. So very quickly, so just a bit about Data Transforms as a company. So we look out for really cool and exciting products, and we've got them all fitting into this little diagram here. So you can see BIReady fits into the data warehousing piece, Yellowfin for our front end. We have a product called MaxiPlan for budgeting forecasting, which takes the likes of TM1 head on. We've got this wonderful product called QFire, which is a data quality firewall. We're actually, you'll see a bit of that in a moment. We're actually working with Bill Inman on his new product, which is textual ETL. So that brings data in from any data source, any textual unstructured source, and actually can put that into a data warehouse for analysis with standard BI tools. It's actually a very incredible tool. So now the demo.
Great. Well, I'll go ahead and jump into the demo. And so first of all, just to show you that there isn't any smoke and mirrors, I'm going to log into Yellowfin and actually show you a report that's going to be built off of our data mart, that's going to be built off of our data warehouse that we're going to build from scratch. So obviously you can attend one of our webinars on Yellowfin, so I won't actually go through Yellowfin, but I can go to my favorites here, and I've got a report already pre-built off of our BIReady Northwind's data mart, and of course it'll come back and it's completely empty. So we know that our source for Yellowfin is actually empty. So we're going to build a data mart and a data warehouse completely from scratch. So I'm going to go right into BIReady. So here we are with BIReady's interface. Okay, and there are three basic environments that we need to worry about. The first one, of course, is our repository. So I've already set up a project here, and I've got a repository. This is where all of our information that we're going to be configuring right now will go into. So migration from from development to test to production is quite simple. All we need to do is migrate the repository content store, the database, and then just run that, and it'll actually build our data warehouse and data marts. And then, of course, we've got our environment that we can set up for our data warehouse and data mart. And our final environment, of course, is our sources. So today, basically, I'm just going to walk through the different tabs from left to right and build our complete data warehouse with some data mart star schemas. So the first thing I need to do is actually set up the environment. So I'll go ahead and edit the environments. And I am, as Ian mentioned, utilize a couple different types of databases. So the first one I'm just going to use as MS Access. I'm going to put my repository in there. So I'm just going to add that and just create that project there. Okay. All right. And then I just need to tell it which type of environment it's going to be. So of course this is our repository, so I'll click on repository and just test it. And if I say okay, we'll see that now our repository information is updated. It is empty, so when we actually build our model, that'll hold that information. So I'll go ahead and finish the environments. I'll go ahead and add our data warehouse, and for today's example, I'll just keep the data mart inside the one environment. And we're going to use SQL Server for our data warehouse, so I'll use my local host, and I've already just added a database for us, and I just need to add in a user, and of course we'll tell it the intended use, which is the data warehouse. Okay, and it's going to ask us for an authentication and test. And I'll add then our first source for today, which Ian already mentioned was Northwind. Okay, and today I'll pick that up from Access. Whoop. And I'll tell it that it's a source. And we're good to go. So now we should see that our data warehouse and data mart information is updated, although it's empty. All right, so now that I've got my environment set up, there are basically 4 steps that we need to walk through. We need to create our model. We need to create the data warehouse shell environment. We need to create our procedures and then run those procedures. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our model. And as Ian mentioned, we can import directly from the CA or Irwin or from an XML file from like Visio or another ER diagramming type software. But if you don't have a CA or Irwin, then we can actually create our own models from scratch and also reverse engineer. So I'm going to reverse engineer today on our Northwind source. I'm going to select our Northwind source and say OK. And so what that's actually going to do is go read that data source, look up all of the tables. As you can see there, it's come back with a number of tables. I can change that to see the views or both. Today I'm going to keep it simple and look at the tables, and I'm going to select all the tables. Okay, I could decide, well, no, I don't want to bring this table in, and no, I don't want to bring that table in. Of course, if we had a model already developed in Visio or CA or Irwin, we wouldn't have to do this particular process. Within one of the tables, I can go ahead and modify what I'm going to bring in as well. So if I look at the employees table, I don't really need their employee title or the courtesy. I don't need their birth date or hire date. I don't need their address, their home number, or extension. So I'm good to go for that. So I'll say OK. If I needed to modify any of the others, I could do that. But I'll say OK. Now it's going to actually put that into a model for us. So the first thing that comes back is a tree view. And if I go ahead and expand that, what it's done is actually said, OK, I can see that order details is the lowest level. And so that's our fact table. And through that, I can see and build a relationship to orders, and then through orders, customers, employees, shippers, and products through orders again, and then suppliers and categories. If I show the attributes, that'll show the full range of information that's coming through. So if I scroll up, you can see that all the information, the fields that are coming in, I can pick up. Okay, so I'll say OK to that. And what it's actually doing here is, because we're moving information from an Access database to a SQL database, it has to do some data type conversion. So it's already come up with the fact that there are 4 fields in this case that need to be adjusted. It's already said, well, we found the best type. You can go ahead and modify it, but these are the suggestions. So I'm taking it from a single to a number formatted length of 14 and a scale of 6. So I actually think that's quite good, so I'll say OK. Now, of course, if we were doing this from Oracle to SQL or SQL to Oracle, it would do the exact same thing. Now, one of the questions was, does this write this in SQL? Well, it's actually going to write it in the native language that your data warehouse is located in. So if it's Oracle, you use PSQL, right? So if it's Microsoft SQL Server, it's going to use Transact SQL. Okay. All right. So I've created my model. I'm going to just add in a time model for ourselves. Okay. So it's going to pick up all the different fields that are data type of a date and say, okay, these are ones that we can add time models to. So actually give it a hierarchy of fiscal and calendar, year, month, day, etc. And we can choose as many or as few as we want. I'm going to keep it simple today and just grab the orders. It doesn't mean we can't use the other dates as fields to do durations or differences to look at, the difference between when I shipped and when it was required, etc. So I'll say OK. Right, so now I've actually built my model. If I want to see how that looks like in an ER-typed diagram, I can hit display. And for the first time, I'll just say no to the attributes, and we can see the entire schema that it's actually created. Now, with that, of course, it's a fairly simplistic data source at the moment, but you can see that it's done a lot of work. It's already picked up all the relationships, and it'll do denormalization as well. So if I close that and just rerun that again and open it up with our attributes, it'll be a real ER diagram there. Okay, so we can see everything that's coming through. Now, even though I've created my model by reverse engineering, I can go ahead and edit that. So if I go in and edit, I can see here the different tables as drop-downs, okay, that are coming through. So my categories, customers, etc. And I can go ahead and adjust anything that I'd like. Now, when a normal, traditional way to set up the types of different history, like slowly changing dimensions, is quite complicated in most ETL tools. In this case, it's quite simple for us to do, and literally it's just a drop-down box. So simple history is going to replace the history with the newest version of, in this case, the description of the category. If I wanted to keep the history of history, that's actually going to log every single change, and we'll have the ability then to either look at the current results in a historical organization, in this case a historical category, or the current category. So it's much more than just a slowly changing dimension, but because we can actually use that forwards and back. All right, so since I've made that change, I also know that I need to change my year, so I can come into my year, and of course it automatically set a data type of a number, but I want to change that to a character because I don't want automatic decimal places coming through, so I'll keep it as that. Okay, and I'll say okay, and it'll update it. All right, so then the second step then is to create the data warehouse shell. So if I hit create, it's actually going to look at the model that we created in the repository and then build the necessary, in this case, data vault tables inside of our data warehouse. Okay, so we can see there it's actually created 30 data warehouse tables. So if I open that up, and if you aren't familiar with the data vault structure, I actually teach a class at TAFE for data warehousing, and our students are currently going through how to build this, and I'm actually giving them 80 hours to build 3 tables in a data vault format. Okay, just think if you had to run and build 200 or 1,000 tables in your data warehouse in data vault structure. It's a lot of work. So what a data vault structure actually does is it'll pull up and have a hub table, and that hub table will keep track of all the different runs, whether it's a full build or an incremental build, and which attribute actually is getting updated. Okay? For simple history, we would have just had one satellite table, but since we changed our description to a history of history, or a slowly changed dimension, it actually created its own satellite. So now it's going to keep track and log every single change to that particular attribute. And I didn't have to code anything. So I can say OK. And of course, if you really want to see the SQL side of things, I can go into SQL Server. And you can see there's my database that I did set up before. There aren't any tables, or at least there weren't. So I'll go ahead and hit refresh. And you can see that it's actually built all of those tables now already. And you can see that there are also tables as well. Okay, so it's done a lot of work already just setting that up. It would be at least a day just to code the structures of those databases. All right, so, but you never want to just have one single source. So you're probably going to have a multitude of different sources, including Excel spreadsheets or CSVs that are holding in maybe some master data or some other type of data that you want to bring in. Of course, you don't really want to bring in directly an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV because you can't quality control it. And that's why I was going to show you a little bit of QFire, because in this case, I'm going to take the example of, well, I'm Northwinds and I do a lot of deliveries, but I don't have any staff of delivery people. So I contract that out, and because I contract it out, they've got their own GPSs, and I can't really standardize how they record that information, so I can't integrate that into my systems. So what I have them do is nice and simple procedure. When they drop off a parcel or whatever, they just jot down on a piece of paper the location code, the GIS code, and the latitude and longitudes. And at the end of the day, when they turn in back at work, they can hand that over to our receptionist, who happens to also have one of his responsibilities is to enter that information from those log books into an Excel spreadsheet. And that person then can go ahead and upload that into QFire. So I'm going to open up QFire and log into QFire. Okay, so QFire is a data quality, data validation, and data collection system. It's extremely robust, but it's very simple to use by end users. And they actually were just awarded the Gartner Cool Vendor of the Year award because instead of having this in the back office type, you can have it in the front end, and it's very simple. So for most people, they won't actually see all of these things, probably just the submission, but I'm going to show you the data collection piece. So I've actually set up a data set collection, and in this case, I've set up a data set called Northwinds Customer Latitude and Longitude. And very simply, if I look at the columns that I set up that they need to upload, it's very simple. Like I said, the GIS column with the latitude and longitude. So any sort of delivery guy, contractor can easily jot that down. Okay, but the really cool thing about that are the business rules. Okay, so once we start importing this data, it actually can validate that information against different things. In this case, I've got 4 different rules. One of them has to be that the GIS ID or the delivery ID has to be a certain length, but it also has to be a reference to our master data that's inside of QFire, and that has to relate directly to some referential data. And if the ID doesn't match to a certain delivery ID, then it's a rejected record, and we need to update it. Also, it's going to check to make sure that latitude and longitudes are in a proper latitude and longitude format. Okay. So if I come back and just take a look at some of the referential data that I've got, so I can open up the Northwind customers. I can see that it's going to check the GIS delivery code with the address, and if it doesn't match, then it's going to tag that for us. So I'll actually do the upload now. So here I've got my Northwinds customer data set. I can add a new submission. I want to put it to my Northwinds customers longitude and latitude. And in this case, I want to do today's date, and I'll just choose a file to upload. I've got a Northwinds customer to upload, and I'll just tell it that it's a CSV file, and I'll add that. Okay, and that's what most people will actually see, and that's going right now to upload it and validate it and data quality it, and then it's actually pushing it into its own SQL Server database for us to pick up as a source in BIReady. So it's complete. So if I just take a look at that, it's actually showing me that I've got a couple of errors. I've got actually 5 errors against the reference codes and 2 errors against the latitude and longitude. And if I just take a look at that, we can see that those are the items. They look for sure that they're not correct. Someone just popped them in there, so we know who that's going to be, so we probably won't use that contractor anymore because this is vital information. All right, so now that it's in there, I won't go into any more of QFire, but we've got a demo for that in a fortnight, so you're more than welcome to come and see a little bit more detail about QFire. So now that it's actually in a table, we'll edit our environment, and I'll add in another data source. Okay, so I'll add in source, and I'll do customer GIS. Okay, and I'll say okay. It's actually in a database that I called QFire. Oops, I need to tell it that it's SQL Server. First, localhost, now the database. And again, I'm going to use the same user, but we could have different users. Okay. And we need to tell it, of course, that it is a source. Okay. And it's just telling me that it might have cached results, but I don't want that. And I'll click connect. There it is, and say OK. So now we just need to modify our model. And again, this is a hard piece if you've hard-coded a whole bunch of stuff, and if you didn't make your data warehouse easily extendable, then this will be a major task. But I'll go ahead and hit reverse engineer again, and I'll grab my customer GIS and say OK. And it's brought up my customer GIS table. I'll click that. That's the one I want to bring in. I'm going to edit that, and the submission ID I don't want to bring in, so that's the submission ID for every time a new submission is uploaded into QFire. I don't need that. Okay, and I'll say OK. And I'll say OK. And now it's going to put that inside of our model. And of course, it's not yet connected because we don't know how it's going to connect. So we'll have to manually do that, but I'll show you how. First, I want to just adjust this because I need to make the GIS a unique identifier. Okay, and if I wanted to change anything, I could. I will change this to simple history so it can keep track of that information, and I'll say OK. So how are we going to connect this? Well, I want to actually link it with orders. So I'm going to click on orders, and I'm going to simply say I need to make a new relationship. And as you can see, I've already got a couple of relationships in here that it automatically reverse engineer detected. So I can add either a dimension in here or an entity, and there's my entity, and if I select an entity, it already knows that I want to create a relationship with that. And sure enough, there it is, and I want to keep a simple history of that as well. And we're done as far as making the model. So now we can see if I expand orders, there's my GIS related into my orders, and I'll say OK. And again, it is doing some conversions, so I'll say OK with that. And the last thing I need to do before I go ahead and rebuild my data warehouse is just, and I've done this on purpose to do it manually, just so you can see how easy it is that there isn't any coding. So I've made it so it hasn't actually mapped from our source to our staging database. So I'm going to create a new mapping and say OK, and just edit that. I'm going to select the source, which is my customer GIS, and which table it's going to come from. And it's as easy as clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging, if you had to do this actually manually for any items. So I'll say OK, and I'll just do one more where I need to edit the orders and tell it that the customer ID in this case today is going to be my GIS ID. And I'm done. Okay. Now, since I've added some new information, and as you can see here, I've got 16 entity types, 16 relationships, and 76 fields coming through. And before we added the GIS information, there was only 15 entities. So I've modified my my model already. So I just need to modify my data warehouse. But before I do that, I might just do a consistency check. So this just helps me to say, okay, there's no errors with our model, and there's no errors putting it forward into our data warehouse. So I could go, if this was a production data warehouse and I was just making small modifications, I could go ahead and just hit adjust, and it would change all the tables for me. But I'll show you I can drop and recreate them on the fly as well, especially since we're just doing this from scratch. So I'll say, okay, it's actually going to say, do you really want to drop all my tables? Yeah, go ahead. and it's going to drop them and recreate them all within a couple of seconds, and we'll see here that there should be now 33 tables instead of 30. Great. So once I've got that, I've got my two data sources. Now I just need to create those instructions, right? So I've created my model, I've created the shell of my data warehouse, so I need to create the instructions that are going to move the data from the source through our model in our repository into our data warehouse. Okay, so there are a few configuration elements in here. I'm not going to go through those today, but one item I am going to show you is the attribute for whether or not you want to do this from beginning of time. Obviously, since this is our first load, we're going to take all of our information from the beginning of time and bring it over. But if you didn't want to, you could go ahead and say, no, I want to start from 2008 or 2012. Okay. If this was an incremental, we'd just switch that to now. Okay, and that would pick up, and it already knows and logs all that information, so there's no tracking that we have to do manually. It does that for us, even if there are no timestamps or logs within the source system. Because it is a data vault structure, it's doing all the audit for us and maintaining all the logs and everything like that. So it already knows the incremental if we need to do that. So I'm going to hit start. So what this is doing is actually now writing all the scripts and all the packages to move the data from our sources through our model in the repository to our data vault structure in our data warehouse. Okay. So this right here is where, of course, all the manual and human intervention gets messed up, and mistakes happen and rework happens when we do it in a traditional fashion. But if I needed to add new tables or new fields, I would just regenerate the instructions based on what we did in the model, and it rewrites them all. Okay, so here it's actually written 1,034 instructions. Now, those are small packages equivalent to like data flows in SSIS or tasks inside of SSIS or in WhereScape, etc. The one huge advantage that BIReady has over WhereScape Red is the fact that when you build your first model in WhereScape Red, if you want to go back and modify those, that is a manual procedure. Whereas here, you can just recreate them as many times as you want, and it'll rewrite them based on the model, and that's the biggest thing. So I'm going to run those procedures. So now I'm just going to start populating, and it's actually going to run those procedures. I'm doing this manually, of course, right now, so we can see the results, but you can schedule this on any frequency that you want, even break up the frequency. So if you wanted to do sales on a real time and your financials on an overnight basis, you can do that. As you can see as well, this is doing some that are waiting, standing by, running, and executing. So it knows dependencies as well. So if it has to do one procedure before another, it's going to have those stand by before it runs. So it's actually finished. It's executed 676 of those procedures out of the 1,034. The reason why I didn't need to do all of them is because some of them are already set up for incrementals, some of them are for error logs to spit things out, etc., etc. So if it doesn't need to run it, it's actually going to skip it. Unlike a lot of ETL tools, especially if you're building it from scratch through, one of the big competitors, it will actually have to run each of the packages, etc., unless you specify and manually code in that this runs only during this time, or if this happens, skip this. BIReady has already done it for us. Great. So it's actually built okay. So if I go back into my data warehouse, I can it's actually built. So I'll say no to the attributes, and it'll show us our ER diagram of our data warehouse. So before I showed you the schematic of our model. Now this is the schematic of our data warehouse. Okay, and I didn't select the attributes, so all the fields, so otherwise it would be massive. Okay. I can also then go ahead and view the data. Okay, so if I want to take a look at some of the information, let's say the category information, and just go next. And so it's actually brought across Okay, it's put in a surrogate ID, and it's also put in some from and to dates. Now, if we started using history of history and added in some different changes, then those would actually have expiry dates when they're actually used, to and from dates. The category ID, the category name, and the descriptions that come through. It's also coded in the fact of unknown, and that's quite important because if somebody actually does skip out on the fact of not putting in a proper category ID, then the transaction will come back as null or invalid. And of course, we want in our BI to show all of our transactions, even the crappy stuff, because that shows us how efficient and how proficient our systems are. And it also allows us to go back and fix things. If it didn't bring in those transactions, we wouldn't know about it. All right. So we've actually built our data warehouse. I'll just jump over to SQL Server, and we can take a look really quickly that now it's populated with information. Great. All right. I've got about 5 minutes, so I'll quickly run through our data mart. Okay. So again, we'll do the exact same thing for our data mart. We'll say data mart, and we can add as many data marts as we want, and we can have the same type of data mart. Okay, so if I needed a detailed sales transaction data mart for my sales reps, I could create that, or if I wanted a monthly or a weekly rolled up sales report with less dimensions for my executives, I can do that as well. And again, Ian mentioned the wizard. So I'll click on the wizard, and of course for star schemas, there are really only two things, facts and dimensions. Facts being our quantifiable information, like our measures, and our dimensions, everything else that describes that. So I've got my order details there. Since I only have one detailed fact in this particular data source, it's already selected that for me, which is great. I'll just click next then, and it's showing me the dimensions that it's automatically selected for me. I'm going to unclick orders because I really want customers, employees, time, shippers, MIGIS as separate dimensions. Also, if I expand products, I typically want to have products as a dimension, but also my suppliers I would like as a separate dimension. So I'm going to click on that as well. And I'll go next. And again, it already has defaulted to the main time member that I've selected, which is my order date. And I'll say OK. And I'll say OK. All right, so it's actually created now the model for our data mart. Of course, a data mart can either be physical or virtual. So if you really have a lot of data and you want to make sure that you've got a lot of good performance, typically you'll do a physical structure. Otherwise, you can do a virtual, and it'll create either real databases, real database tables, or database views. And I'll click and we'll see down below that we'll actually get about 8 tables as we do. And I can click on there, and we can actually see it looks really like a star schema. We've got time, customer, GIS, customers, employees, products, shippers, suppliers, and our fact order details. And Ian also mentioned our data shop. So I can click on data shop, and I can add a new data shop. And this is really a way to show end users or our business community, without having to build some BI reports, how the model is working and if we're on the right track. So I'll select my order details, and I'll say edit. And so what I want to do is I think I'll want to grab company name for my customers. And I might want to grab my product name, and I'll grab my unit price and quantity as measures, and I'll just set those as definitions. That's money, and quantity as a measure as well. And again, I'll just select my order date as a time dimension and say OK. And I'll tell it to create that. Okay, and it's just going to open it up in Excel for us in a normal pivot table. So I can go to my options, turn on the field list, put the product name over on the side, maybe the company name at the bottom, and there we can see very simply, very quickly, how our star schema actually came out, and we can make any changes that we need to. All right, I'm going to close that. So the last couple things that we need to do is actually generate the instructions for our data mart. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and click Start to rush through this. So it's, again, writing all that ETL code and scripts, taking what we know about the data warehouse already and what the model is for the data mart that we're building, and it's writing the code to move the data from the data warehouse to the data mart. Okay, so it's written another 289 instructions. So I'll go ahead and run those instructions so it can populate that data. And again, we can schedule this in the same job or different jobs as the data warehouse remotely. So it's finished. Great. So now I can come back into Yellowfin, and I can rerun this report. I'll just close it and open it again. Oh, took a little too much time. So I'll log back in, and I'll go to my favorites, click on that report, and there it is. But of course, the real test is we brought in that GIS information, so let's create a report really quickly. So I'll go Create Report, and I'm going to select my Northwinds demo, and I'm going to say I want to grab in my latitude, my longitude, and I want to do it by my order invoice, and I want to bring in, let's say, my order sales net, and I want to automatically sum that. And in this case, I'm just going to show the chart only because we just want a GIS map. So I'll go Next. I'll click on the chart. I'll come in, change the chart type to a map. I'll click on the map, say Save. I'll just update the fields. Okay, so my label, and then my latitude and longitudes, and hit refresh, and voila, we have the information coming in. And of course, this is Google Maps, so if I wanted to drill down on Brazil, and it just so happens that that I am married to a Brazilian, so she's quite interested in her shoe sales happening in Brazil. And there we are. We can see that there are multiple items, actually 30-odd some in there, and those are the values of those given invoices. So there you have it. There is a start to finish. Two sources mapped together. Again, it was quite simple, but as far as a data source architecture, but you can see the massive results that we can achieve very quickly, and the ability to drop and recreate very quickly as well. Excellent.
Good work, Dan. So just to wrap up, at Data Transformed, our solutions are designed to help you succeed with faster delivery times that reduce cost, to give you speed to value, and of course using our agile approach that engages the business. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the presentation for today. Dan and I would like to thank you very much for joining us, and if you have any questions at all, please call us, and there's our number at the bottom of the screen there. So thank you very much, and have a great day. Thank you.